Hello and welcome to GreenFleet Talks. My name's Kate Armitage and I'm your host for our discussion today, and I'm delighted to be joined again by Mark Pym, Managing Director at Charged EV. Hi Mark.
Hi Kate, how are you?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Good to speak again. Mark, it's been a busy couple of months. 2024 is certainly proving to be an interesting year for electric vehicles. We have had a recent change in government, and it looks as though part of that change will be Labour pledging to bring back the ICE vehicle ban, to reinstate it to 2030. What do you think about this? Do you think it's going to become a reality? And if so, what impact may it have on business plans?
I guess we hope so. Certainly hope it becomes a reality. If looking at the experience that we had when the ban was first pushed back to 2035, I think one of the things that we picked up on is the level of inquiries and the people that are starting to make the move early and consider transition early. It wasn't really slowing people down. I think people that had gone through some element of testing or transition or a certain part of their fleet had got to a level of comfort that actually they were going to continue moving forward at a pace that they'd already decided on. For me, the 2035 move in the first place really just helped what I think would have extended a few sort of opportunities for the people that would be towards the back end anyway. Some of those real difficult, challenging fleets. But on the most part, our inquiries actually bolstered a little bit during that period of time. And I still think to today that actually bringing it forward is not going to have huge impacts for the most part, for most fleets. Obviously, it's going to be reliant on technology, the selection of EVs and battery range, any battery technology that happens to help and deliver that. So there's definitely some work that's still to be done within the industry. But I think anyone that's in this space understands the speed of change in the evolution of tech over the last few years. If that continues and progresses at the rate that it has, those answers are going to be, also those questions are going to be answered over the next 2-3 years and will be much closer to where we need to be. So yeah, for me, I think it's positive. I think I tend to work on the 80-20 rule. I think that for me, the 80% of the fleets are already probably going to hit that 2030 mark anyway, regardless of whether the ban stays where it was. So there's just a bit more work to do to make sure we get that remaining 20% that can be brought forward slightly.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, it's extremely positive that the Labour government are supporting the ban on electric vehicles, but it does raise questions about that 20%, which under the ZEV mandate we still had that breathing space. So it's going to put the pressure back on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think obviously government support, not just bringing the ban forward, but what are all the things they're going to bring in to support driving that forward, if that's investment and additional grants and funding and open up opportunities there. I think that's going to help. Just a blanket moving it forward and then leaving everything else as the status quo may not have the desired impact. But like I said, for me, it's that 8-20% rule. The majority of fleets, I believe, can get where they need to be with the evolving tech. Yeah. There's probably just a bit of focus on some of those really challenging, difficult fleets.
And you are exactly right, Mark. Any announcement around moving the ban forwards again has to be supported, I think, with more incentives, stronger policy, because this isn't easy, and it's already a challenging time. But all positive, I think. So let's focus about fleets who have not yet begun their journey to electrification, who are right on the edge, and maybe are thinking, well, Labour's going to bring this forward again, so now's the time. What advice do you have for those fleets about getting started? And, it's a question that I ask regularly, Mark. Is that advice changing, or is it still the same kind of key points?
I think there's some really key fundamentals that won't change, which is make a start, simply. I think dip your toe in the water in some way, shape or form, start having those conversations. The sooner you can, the sooner you can start answering or getting answers to the questions that you perceive to be the most challenging. There is a whole range of experts out there and people that you can engage with. There's a ton of free content all over the place, but start exploring at the earliest possible opportunity for those businesses. Our advice is always this: if you're a super-sized fleet and you've got the funds there to go and start doing a whole ton of analytics and work there, absolutely, that would be great. If you're a smaller business and an SME that doesn't, pick out the vehicles that today that you think could transition, or the earliest the transition. Don't get caught up in trying to solve tomorrow's challenges with today's tech. Tech will evolve at a rate that we're not used to. It will just continue to grow and get better. Tomorrow's tech will solve tomorrow's challenges. Let's worry about what we can do today. Let's get us toe in the water and let's start getting a sense for what's there, and just slowly and incrementally moving forwards. I think once our experience has been with fleets is that once they've done that, once they've had that first 5 or 6 electric vans on the road, once they've had some charging in depots, once they've figured out that 3 or 4 of their drivers can have charging at home, and they've started working through these new ways of working, they themselves start thinking a different way, and actually the transition just picks up speed relatively quickly.
And you can support with that, can't you? Charge DV, you've been down this road many times with hundreds of fleets, so you really can steer. If a fleet comes to you and says, what do we need? You can really steer them in terms of what's practical, what's realistic, not too much to start with.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a case of taking every fleet on its own merit, really understanding what the challenges are, what the concerns are. If it's a fleet that's a return to base scenario today, recognising that depending on the speed and what they want to enact that transition, it may have to move away from being a return to base scenario and start allowing vehicles to be charged at home to maximise the available opportunity to charge, keeping costs down for depot charging, etc. There's a whole range of things that can be done, and it's just engaging with the fleet, understanding what their current challenges are, understanding what their key drivers are for them, and then sort of making a plan and a strategy to try and target those.
Yeah, great. And you can build on this gradually. It's you don't have to have all the answers on day one.
Absolutely.
So, Mark, if I kind of think of that strategy that you've just described for fleets that haven't begun yet, we're really talking about targeting the low-hanging fruit, which is great. But of course, many, many, many of our readers and listeners at GreenFleet are now beyond that first installation phase. They've got the first wave of vehicles, they've done all of the low-hanging fruit, and to be frank, it's getting a little bit harder now. So the vehicles that they've got left are much harder to electrify, be that because they're vans, because of the payload, because of the range the vehicles are traveling, because they're HGVs, or they may even be specialist vehicles. So what solutions are out there for these fleets to consider?
It's difficult to talk through a solution because every one of them will be slightly different. It's not just around the vehicles. Sometimes it's around the drivers, the way the vehicles are used. But there's a whole array of opportunities to explore. The sooner you can get that simpler part, the low-hanging fruit, as you mentioned, across the line, and take some of the learnings from that, you can sort of extrapolate that out a little bit to understand what the next stages are. And taking it in stages, really focus on the areas that you can affect today. There's still potentially 5 years to go. Let's not, again, we want to get everyone there as quick as possible, but I'm always a champion of making sure that we don't try and take someone on a journey too fast and create detractors. We want people that have gone through a journey, gone through that transition, and they're really positive and they're excited to go out there and champion the transition to their sort of fleet peers. We've seen it in the past where people have been forced into, rushed into, or encouraged to do something too quick and trial something too soon. That actually they become a detractor to the whole transition, and that's almost as bad as creating positive influences is good. So we've got to be really careful that you make sure that people understand the stages that they can take their fleet through, understanding the tools that could be available. Mentioned earlier on that there's a whole heap of or range of things you can do for those low-hanging fruit to get started without needing analytics. The more complex you get, the more analytics you may need. So again, if you telematics and all these types of things to get data, the first stage for me would be on these more complicated vehicles is if you don't yet have telematics and these things in place to capture the data, go there first. start getting them in now so you can capture that data sooner rather than later. The bigger set of data there is, the easier it is to work out what the best solutions are. And quite possibly, and obviously I'm a champion for electrification, but quite possibly it's not the only solution for HGVs and large vehicles. There will be alternatives and stepping stones that they may need to go through.
Yeah, certainly. We talk about alternative fuels quite a lot at GreenFleet, and I agree with you. You know, there are certainly in the short to medium term there are a plethora of opportunities around in terms of changing fuel types before you go fully electric. The HGV is an interesting one, but you're absolutely right, Mark. If you are operating a big fleet of vans or HGVs, you know, you have to have the data, and you need it for the purposes of modelling what your fleet's doing, but you also need it to know actually what emissions you're dealing with today, and you know, you've got to put a benchmark in the ground to know where you're coming from. Yeah,
I think that goes back to one of the early points around understanding what the key successors to these transition is. It's for everybody. It's not just about emissions. There could be cost things. There could be all sorts of different things in there they've got to do. It might be around winning tenders. It might be around being more attractive to consumers. It could, all sorts of reasons. And that really understanding what those are will help you make the decisions along the line. You might find that there's some solutions that hit a certain couple of metrics that are really important to you, but actually they provide some real value over here, which is not really considered. And therefore that financial modelling could change based on some of those things. So again, it's really understanding what the key successors are to your transition.
Yeah, okay, really good point. And if we're talking about kind of the key metrics, I'm going to add in driver engagement as something that potentially is overlooked in terms of the importance that it will have on a transition. So what advice have you got for employers in terms of how they engage their EV drivers, how they educate them and turn them into advocates?
Yes, I think driver engagement is huge. I think for me, it's probably one of the biggest things that you've got to consider early on, where we have come to those scenarios where we've spoken to fleet managers or people that have started a transition and it's not quite gone as expected and they sort of fell behind. It's because they've not put the groundwork in with drivers early on. EV champions, getting people on board, bringing them in, getting people specifically trained up and part of the decision-making process is really, really key. I always go a step further than that, as well as bringing on champions. You almost want to bring in a couple of people that you know are going to be the most challenging in that process. Quite often we speak to companies and they've picked people that have already got EVs or know someone that have engaged about it, and they're the people that want it to work. You actually need to get some people that want it to fail. Let them get in there, let them break it, let them throw all the challenges and really difficult questions out there early on, so you can understand what the worst scenario is going to be, and then you can play off the back of that. I think it's really important that you don't just do driver engagement, but actually you get the most challenging of your driver base on board as well as soon as possible.
Mark, it's such a great point, and actually to know who your detractors are. And there may not be drivers, there may be other people in the business who are secretly working against you because you haven't quite worked out who you need to bring on board. But a really great point and great advice too, to kind of, if you can turn the naysayers around, then you're in a really strong position.
Yeah, quite often it's just knowledge, getting them in early, the conversations and getting them talking to the people that understand it. They've heard something down the pub from Bob, who's told them a 15-year-old tale of something that happened, and that's in the back of the mind, and they just don't fully understand it. Quite often it's just knowledge. Give people knowledge and understanding and get them in an EV, and they start believing pretty quick. Excellent
advice, Mark. Get them in an EV quick, and the more the merrier. Mark, it's been a pleasure talking to you again. Thank you very much for your insight and your advice, and of course thank you to Charged EV for joining GreenFleet Talks.
No worries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That is about all we've got time for. Thank you for watching, and please tune in to GF365 again soon.